This presentation is about the C# UDAP reference implementation. I am Joseph Shook from SureScripts. The reason that, one of the things that about this, the UDAP profile that interests me was the PKI piece and the OAuth 2 and the OpenID Connect and all that stuff. I hadn't done a lot of that. I used to work on Windows security kinds of things and LDAP, and so I spent this last 10 years missing out. I felt like I really want to do that. But I did work on a project called the Direct project, and I worked on that open source project in C#, and it was all about PKI. And so when I saw the UDAP spec, I'm like, that's really cool. That's a scalable solution for this authentication and authorization. And that was about 2 years went by. I didn't get a chance to work on it, and then about a year and a half ago, I did, and so I just put everything into it. It's one of the highlights of what I've worked on is this and the Direct projects. So for the reference implementation last year, the center area there, right there, I did a DevDays presentation on this, and it didn't do this thing called tiered OAuth, and the tiered OAuth, we'll see on the next slide more about what that kind of is. This year, of course, I did another one, this slide is just like index into what's really here. So after this, you would go there if you really wanted to go through this reference implementation. It's a README file that describes everything. There's some videos in there too. It's got all of the pieces that you would want to stand up in your desktop in a lab environment, a real tiered OAuth experience. This here is a UI tool that I created that is like it is a deconstruction of what happens in UDAP, so you can walk through that process that takes like the first 5 seconds of your experience and kind of slows it all down and lets the developer see every step along the way. It's a great educational tool. It works really good for connectathons. Let's see, if you want to see a demo of that tool over about a 45-minute period, that's a pretty good video to watch. And let's go ahead and move on to the next slide. Okay, so these different boxes that are on here, all of these are represented in this reference implementation. I guess there is a reference implementation, but this particular 2024 demo is like a tutorial on how you would build this out if you wanted to start your implementation of UDAP. And that's what Brandon did. And they're using it in the Foundry to secure the patient identity and matching implementation of that IG. So in there's a UDAP client there, which is actually the UDAP ed tool. The Fire server is a C# reference implementation that Brian Postlethwaite is written in C#. It's just file-based. The stuff that I actually deploy from the reference implementation used to use this. I now have a C# reverse proxy sitting in front of a GCP Fire server. And so that's in the main core repo. There is an authorization server. That is based on DwayneD Identity Server. It's open source. You do have to pay for it if you have over $1 million in revenue, but the licensing is not that steep. And then there is a third-party identity provider, also DwayneD Identity Server. This is the tiered piece, right? The user or the actor here gets to choose when they register with this Fire server their identity provider of choice. The utopian version of this is that this IDP is UDAP enabled also. So when they go through the registration and they talk to this authorization server, it gets an IDP parameter in the URL, it can, if it has not registered previously and they're a part of the same trust community, this is the PKI piece, it can auto-register with that for the first time. So this is a client-server relationship in UDAP world. We have, we've tested this. Okta has an implementation as an identity server. I have an implementation, and so we've done this not just within my lab environment, but also across 3 different reference implementations, which is pretty cool. Josh?
Yeah, you mentioned the utopian version, which makes sense. Is there a non-utopian kind of fallback?
Yeah, so the specification doesn't indicate you have to do that. So you could pick IDMe or Clear or something, and you instead of having that dynamic experience, you would pre-configure it like you would if you wanted to connect up to Google or Facebook, that same OpenID Connect. This is OpenID Connect with the PKI pieces.
I missed that. Thank you.
It's like the packages that I created were created so that Dwayne D's identity server could do PKI, right? I try as hard as I can to not unwind any of the stuff that they have or any of the stuff that you get out of the Microsoft stack, because you want to retain all of that work that's been historically, all the security best practices. Let's see, what else we got up here? I think that's good. We got to go pretty fast because, look, I've already lost 7 minutes, I think. All right. This is just a digest of all the projects that are in there. And I pretty much talked to it already at the diagram. So I do think it's important to point out that, so as a developer doing PKI kinds of things, typically they ignore it, right? They code around it, they return true for any kind of chain validation. That is not the case in this lab. This little PKI, it's a CLI. It generates all the certs. I generate 3 communities, 3 different trust communities in there. The certificate server is there because when you do this kind of thing, typically you have a CA, an intermediary, and a client cert or an end cert, right? The intermediates typically are discovered dynamically. There's an AI extension in the certificate, and you can go out and discover it and download it. Of course, you have to choose to trust the CA. There's also CRLs, certificate revocation lists. All that's in here, all that's built in, and it's all hosted at this static website that's on your desktop. So you get to see that stuff happening. And in fact, this is not an OpenSSL thing. This is actually all C#, like every last piece in there. And it's good enough to be, it fills out all of the certificate attributes that you would need in a real production setup. Fire server, auth server, IDP. Okay, let's move on. So I published these NuGet packages out of the source, which is available, right? The main ones there, the metadata server is what you would put on your Fire server to present metadata. The UDAP server is used for the Dwayne D's identity server. The UI is actually a Razor class library package. And so if you spin up Dwayne D's identity server first time and you need to do like authorization code flow with the UI pieces, they have a little a .NET tool that you run, and it adds the UI pieces. That's essentially what this started with. And then some modifications for the account login that are UDAP specific, the callback page that is UDAP specific, and then packaged into a UI NuGet package. Client is just the UDAP client. The UDAP ed actually uses that UDAP or that NuGet package for its client. And this Vonk server is actually a plugin for Firely. It's a separate project. I put the link on here. Its data was built last year, and if anybody was interested in it, we could get it up to date. It's just kind of difficult because it's not like it's strongly typed to something I can compile against, so I have to look at the version that they're on and get all the dependencies matched up. A little bit of work, but it works. I've ran it. And then some support packages that you would get just because you pulled in these core packages. So the rest of this we'll just rip through really fast. So this is packages that you would need, some extension methods to make it easy to pull in all of the services, right, that you would need for UDAP. Then you go from services in ASP.NET to the pipeline, some more extension methods to make that easy, and some kind of app settings. This represents me. This is like my default community. It's the UDAP metadata that you would see defined. Over here is kind of a map to that, which is like a file search store manifest. But basically, I need a certificate on the server. And of course, this isn't secure, but in a lab environment, this works great. And is that 10 minutes that I saw? 10 minutes? Okay, perfect. This stuff's all based on interfaces. So there's an interface for this. You could implement that interface and use an HSM instead, which you'd probably do something like that to protect your private keys. And then kind of the same thing, we just move on to how you would set up your auth server. You can't tell as much here, but this is a little bit darker, bolded text. This is that piece for OpenID Connect. So this authorization server needs something external. A lot of times if you were to set up with Google or Facebook, you'd have some very specific extension method like that. So this is everything you need to light up a third-party identity server, and which is pretty easy to do. I actually want to say that the hardest thing in this whole application is the code behind that. I spent about 3 weeks, I think, when I first went and implemented tiered OAuth, and I couldn't have a conversation with my wife or anything because that's all I could think about, and I sometimes didn't sleep, and I got it through it, it worked, but it's one of those things I'm going to spend multiple years looking at that before it all sticks in my head permanently, is every time I visit it, it's pretty complex, all the handshakes and everything, and to wire in the PKI. The PKI is the easiest part compared to that. It's just crazy. And Josh keeps shaking his head, yes.
Does she talk to you now?
Yeah, she talks to me nonstop all the time, yeah. Yep. I try to listen. Here's another extension method that's very specific to identity. So, an auth server and the identity server have a lot of similarities. There's just some things that are a little bit different. So the extension name's a little bit different. And also with the author or identity server, you're like a file server. Right? You can other authorization servers can auto-register with you. So of course you're going to have metadata also. Let's get past that. We're going to go a little faster now because we really want to come to this point. So I have a demo, and this demo is on the GitHub repo as a video. I kind of want to not do the video, and just do the real thing. I had to come out of, oh no, that should work. There we go. So this is that repo, and I recorded some videos. There's a client validation demo here. That's not what we're looking at. And here is the tiered OAuth demo. I got a whole 5 minutes. So what I can do here is I could stop, and we could ask questions, or I could keep going, or a little bit of both. I'll let everyone in the audience decide if they want to ask a question now. All right, let's keep going. And you can ask questions as we go. This tool is that tool that I've been talking about. It's the deconstruction. I think Louis named it the other day as a deconstruct. I really liked it because I called it UDAP education tool. Joe called it something about diagnostics. I've used everybody else's word to describe it, but it's just called UDAP Ed. How is it for size? Yeah, it's going to be pretty small. The spirit of what's happening on here over on the left, that's the discovery. Then here's your auto registration. And then once you've registered, you have strategies like I'm going to do a B2B workflow or a consumer or tiered OAuth. What we're going to show here is tiered OAuth. So we're going to go through registration. What's happening is we're picking a anchor right now because this fire server that I'm hitting, I need to know whether I trust it or not. So we got to load an anchor into our trust store. And then the next thing that's happening is we're going through client registration. And we're going to upload a certificate. This tool is not a confidential client. It wasn't meant to be. I have ideas of how I could make it, but I wanted to show how to use it. You can't see up here, but there's links in the presentation. You can go right now from your laptop and go and hit this tool and start experimenting with this stuff. And in fact, you don't even have to have a cert to experiment with it, because the test certs should work against my Fire Labs fire server. And all the drop-downs have some pre-filled in endpoints for you. Okay. So you see in that red area, there's a subject alt name space. So when you get a certificate, you could ask for more than one subject alt name, which means that you could register with a single site multiple times with different subject alt names, because you might have multiple reasons of why you want to register for different purposes. And so what you're seeing is on the left side is we're building up those UDAP structures. On the right, and this one here is signed. On the right-hand side, what you see is the decoded version of it. And if you roll back further, it also, inside of the decoded version, you'd see the X5C header, and you can go look at the certificate also in there. I have plans in the future to also resolve the intermediate certs, the certificate revocation list, and those kinds of things. All right, we're going to run out of time. This deserves its own 45-minute presentation, which there's a link to something just like that. I'm going to accelerate this so it can jump through. So here we are in tiered OAuth, and right in that area is where the user gets to pick their identity provider. I have 3 identity providers in the web-based one that are already pre-filled in that actually work. And you notice that it had like localhost 5,000 and something. This is that lab environment on your desktop running right now. This is what the demo is recording, is that experience. And it's pointing out the IDP is a query parameter. Here we are, we've landed on the authorization server. And at the bottom, there's a launch tiered OAuth. This is a similar experience for the Health to Go, which is EMR Direct's staging environment. And we're choosing to go ahead and run with that third-party identity provider. So here we go. I didn't hit play. I'm pointing out it's a different endpoint. It's so small, but yeah. Going through some consent workflows here. Now so we got back a access or a code, right? We're going to cache that in for an actual access token. And so this next step, we are going to go through the metadata signing process again. You can see, right, kind of scrolled past, but this in the yellow on the left is the metadata that's been signed. 1 minute. So you have the opportunity at this moment, if this was deployed at scale, right, and we've been able to auto-register with these 1,000 different places, 100 different organizations, and you have a client that has been compromised and we need to shut them down. Today's world, right, you get on the phone, you start calling everybody, and half of the other ends, they either don't know what you're talking about, they don't know how to do it, or you can't get a hold of them, right? But with this scenario where you have a trust community, you can revoke the cert. So during this process where I'm going to try to cache in this code for an access token, the X509 chain is going to be built and verified, including that CRL lookup, right? So we're going to check the revocation. So they can be, that client can be removed from all these organizations without any interaction with actual humans. There is, down at the bottom, you'll eventually see something about an HL7 identity, I think. Oh, I probably don't have that in here. That's okay. In the actual deployed implementation, there is this concept of a HL7 identifier, which is like a health ID that we get from the identity provider, and then the authorization server can retain that, and you can use it in fire queries. Different demo. That's about it. Any last minute questions? Right there.
So I guess a client, to start using, so as a client, what do you need to just to start using this method of authentication? You need like a CA certificate and ID registration with an IDP somewhere, and could this client could be a person or a machine user also, right? Or
it can be both, right? Yeah, we didn't talk about that. There's the system prefix scopes for doing B2B experience, and the patient and the user. It's the same thing when you talk about smart. But as far as like being a part of this and there's going to be a community, right? So the stuff that we've done in Connectathons, EMR Direct has issued certificates for us. So all the stuff that we do, we pretty much have gotten a certificate from that CA. And in TEFCA, there'll be somebody that will become the CA for that, and we would get a certificate to join that community. And yeah, this lab environment, of course, lets you experience that locally, so you can kind of get your mind wrapped around that process. Josh, you don't have any questions? You don't want to?
I have a lot of questions, but I'm going to find you later.
Yeah, I know.
Should I come to that?
Yes. All right, thank you.